we are live here. Hello, everyone. It's been almost a week now since we've been live here on Substack. I am joined by Chuck Cora, who is the host of Appodlachia. Chuck, how are you doing? Thanks for coming back on the show today, man.
Thanks for having me and for inviting me. I'm doing great. It's been a week here in beautiful Chattanooga, Tennessee. And nothing happening at the national level, nothing
No,
going on anywhere. So don't even know what we're going to talk about.
no, there's no ideas of what we're going to talk about here. But, of course, we're going to start with all of the different ICE raids, the protests in response to them, the escalation by the Trump regime. We'll be talking about that. Also, be talking about this new AI plant in Memphis. That there's a whole story around that I think is not being covered enough by the media. Understandably, so with everything going on with Trump right now, but we need to bring some attention to it. There's also a surveillance program that was recently ended by the University of Michigan that I think is still really relevant to talk about. So we're going to go back and dive into what exactly happened with that and how it ties into the pro-Palestine movement. And finally, conversations on do we need a Joe Rogan of the left? Pros and cons. We'll kind of get into that a little bit. I think there's a lot to say there. But we are going to start off with what's happening around the country. It is everywhere right now going on with these ICE raids. We started seeing them come out of California as, Trump was deploying the National Guard over there over the weekend, deployed the Marines to Los Angeles, saying that there was violent protests breaking out all over the place. But, it was basically they were showing the same image of the same burning car over and over and over again. So now, in response to that, they are saying that they're going to deploy more of these special response teams to 5 additional cities around the country: Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, and to Northern Virginia. And now we are seeing protests break out in about like 16 different cities around the country. And that's ahead of the fact that there are planning to be mass protests basically everywhere in the country on Saturday, on Donald Trump's birthday, which he tried to put a military parade around to make it seem like it's not a parade for his birthday. So there's a lot of different angles that I want to kind of like go into with this, Chuck. But like, what was your first, thoughts about everything going on with the ICE raids, the protests in response, Trump's escalation? Like where did you fall in all of this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, unfortunately, it's not surprising what's happening because, quite honestly, Donald Trump campaigned on this, and
Yeah,
this is what we feared going into the election. And now it's being played out before our eyes, and it's terrifying for other people. Like I'm not worried, obviously, but it's terrifying to see because our friends, our neighbors, our communities are being disrupted by ICE, by these militarized forces coming
yeah,
in, ripping families apart. And I think one thing, actually, to kind of amend what I just said, one thing that really should worry everybody is how police and how ICE, these federal agents, are trampling over people's First Amendment rights. We've seen, if you watch some of the live streams in Los Angeles, for example, there are protesters that are protesting peacefully. Maybe they're hurling insults at police officers and whatnot, but that's a protected right under the First Amendment if you're in a public space. And they were.
yeah,
Police are shooting them with air quotes non-lethal ammunition point blank. They're shooting the press point blank with these types of non-lethal ammunition. This is a form of suppression of speech, and it's something that I think everybody should be really concerned about, and anybody that cares about the First Amendment should really be concerned about. But more so than that, I mean, this is just a heartless regime that is in charge of our federal government, and it's just I look at this and I think, you can kind of feel helpless in these moments because there's so much, like, you see the full strength and power of the federal government coming in and just
yeah,
executing these raids and these kidnappings. And that's what we should be referring to them as. They aren't
yeah,
deportations. Deportation is a legal proceeding. This is a kidnapping. They are
yeah.
taking these people away from their families and taking them to God knows where. And so it's really concerning. And I feel like this is something, honestly, that the administration gets off on. So I don't see them ending this or curtailing it anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, you are essentially right about, calling it a kidnapping. We can call it an abduction. I mean, like they are disappearing people off the streets,
Hmm.
not giving them any due process. In a lot of cases, they are showing up to what elementary school graduations. They're showing up to people's workplaces. They're showing up to the courthouses while these people are going to their hearings that we are asking them to go to, and
Yeah.
they are being detained and taken away after that. So I mean, like everything that you can think of as far as bending the law or breaking the law is happening right now. I mean, this is all a spectacle. Like Trump
Yeah.
is straight dehumanizing these people. He is, stripping them of their rights. He's instilling fear into a population. I came across people here where I live at in Missoula, Montana, who, they appear to be immigrants. They're non-white people. They have a food truck here in my city, and they had customers basically kind of like tell them like, hey, if you don't give us good service here, we're going to report you to ICE. And these are just
Wow.
natural, U.S. citizens. They just happen to be non-white, so they just appear that they are. But the point is like this is the kind of like terror that's kind of like domino affecting across our country right now. Trump is emboldening so many different people to talk to these people however they think they want to, and I really don't know where it goes from here. I am glad that it seems that people are going to be ready to get back out into the streets this weekend. I think we need that. I think that we need to just show on in multiple different levels that we are not going to normalize this by being silent and not speaking out against what the Trump regime is doing, because we really do need more people speaking up right now.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely I've been really impressed with the level of activism, of grassroots activism, especially in places like Los Angeles and other communities where these ICE raids are happening. The thing I've been
Yeah,
disappointed about is the reaction from some elected officials, particularly Democrats who should be on our side on this, and just their kind of lukewarm way of approaching this. And every time that there is a at least a broadly covered protest like in Los Angeles, there's always a focus and a fixation on what the protesters are doing wrong. People scolding them for, oh, the optics of this is bad, or you shouldn't be lighting things on fire or looting and all that stuff. And of course, like in an ideal situation, you wouldn't. But I think there's so much focus on like the fact that one person lit a Waymo on fire, which is a driverless kind of Uber situation, I guess. We don't have them here, but they have them in the Los Angeles, New York.
yeah,
But and less focus on what the government is doing to suppress speech. And I come back to that because this administration has, ever since they took office, been slowly and sometimes quickly chipping away at the foundations of the First Amendment. And even by shifting the focus to what the protesters are doing wrong and lecturing them instead of focusing on what is actually happening to suppress these rights is in and
yeah.
of itself an erosion of the First Amendment. And so that's something I've been so disappointed about. And I wish that there were more Democrats that were speaking out because honestly, they have an obligation to do this. The party who, when there's an election that comes up, they claim to be like pro-immigrant, we're anti separating families, all this stuff, all the rhetoric. But when it comes down to it, I haven't seen a lot of actual courage, political or otherwise, come out. And I mean, I think that that is really telling. There have been some, I will say, there have been some. Zoran Mamdani in New York City, who's running for mayor. Granted, he is running for mayor, but he
Yeah.
has been a very outspoken opponent of ICE. There has been others. Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, of course, has been abolish ICE for a long time. So there definitely are some, but I think it's just been disappointing to see how some of them have reacted.
No, I could not agree more. I mean, I think that the list has been growing over the last like month or so. I mean, like maybe you can point out to like maybe 2 dozen, maybe 30 of them, but we're also talking about a body of 250, right, between the House
Right.
and the Senate. So I mean, it's a small number in comparison. I mean, I saw that they all like marched into Republican Majority Leader's Thune's office today after a Democratic senator got thrown to the ground at a Christy Nome conference.
Yeah,
So
that was wild.
when they want to present a united front and a show of force, they're willing to do that. But maybe it just takes one of their own being thrown to the ground, not the protesters out in these different cities. I will say this: it is remarkable to me that there are so many Democrats who are willing to, and honestly accurately, point out the dangers of Donald Trump and a fascist regime when you're leading up to an election like they did last year. But now that we're actually in the throes of it, And
Hmm.
we are seeing it day by day play out. It's
Yep.
actually exactly what they said was going to happen. In a lot of cases, it's worse. And yet they're more quiet now than they were during the election season. Like, I don't understand the reasoning behind it. Like, if it's some strategy, it's a terrible strategy. If it's just like callous indifference, then you know what? Obviously, that guy, David Hogg, was right. We do need to replace a lot of these people
Yeah.
because your response to this moment shouldn't be, I can't even muster up a tweet.
Yeah.
That can't be it.
My theory is that they're afraid to come out and flat out say abolish ICE. Most of them,
Yeah,
that's because, and there's so many of them like Lissotkin and the people who are really trying to toe this centrist line, and they're thinking like, oh, this is going to make me seem anti-police, and when I'm up for re-election or when I go home to my district, I'm going to get yelled at. And the thing is like, if if you really believe in your heart that ice should not exist, and I do personally, then you should be full throatedly saying that. Now, it may be the case that a lot of those Democrats don't, and I imagine that there's a sizable amount that don't. But I think that some of them are kind of cowardly when it comes to that and afraid to really come out hard on a policy that may be controversial to some of their constituents, but that is in my opinion the correct position. And I think that this is something that has kneecapped a lot of Democrats. They get fixated on this whole, oh, 80-20 issue thing. Like, oh, this is an 80-20 issue. There are things that you have to be brave and politically courageous on that are not going to be overwhelmingly popular among the people who elect you. But you have
yeah,
to take that position in order to actually show some form of leadership. I mean, the Freedom Riders were not popular
right.
when they were protesting segregation. Segregation was wildly popular. Slavery was wildly popular. That doesn't mean that it was a good thing. I don't know. It's driving me crazy, and it's just
Yeah,
you see it every day, and you just start seeing like who are the real ones and who aren't.
no, you absolutely do, and I think a lot of them get caught up in the fact that like, oh, Trump ran on immigration, mass deportations. It was a really popular thing for him. There is a maybe get a little controversial here. I think there's a big distinction between wanting to enforce immigration laws and where ICE is right now.
A hundred
ICE
percent.
ICE is a hyper militarized police force that operates in plain clothes. They have even less restrictions on them than the police do. And the police barely have any restrictions on them anymore. They don't have to follow any due process. They can go anywhere they want to without any warrants, abduct anyone they want to. I mean, it is absolutely unconscionable the level of power that these people have. And we're supposed to just normalize this? I mean, what is next? Are we going to have a police force similar to ICE that can just go and capture American citizens whenever they want to for any reason whatsoever? I mean, that's really the logical, next step of all of this. So I think
Well,
that
yeah.
yes, I mean ICE to a degree. I mean, I don't think it should even be controversial to abolish them. I mean, at the end of the day, there should be no force in this country that can just go and abduct people and not give them any due process and ship them out of the country. Any entity that does that should not exist. I don't think that should be a controversial opinion.
I don't think it should either. And people may think that it's hyperbolic to say that the next step on the slippery slope is to be doing this to natural born American citizens, but it's not. And we've
Yeah,
seen echoes of attempts to do things similar to this. How they're trying to criminalize or at least make it a civil violation to say things like free Palestine because it is because the government wants to interpret that as being supportive of a terrorist organization.
right.
And that is such a slippery slope. And I don't care if it's a logical fallacy or not because it's true. And the more that people normalize, the more that we give them, the more they're going to take. It's the whole if you give a moose a muffin type
Yeah,
situation. I mean, we learned that by reading that book when we were like 7, and it's still valid. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile.
yeah, absolutely. And there is honestly there's so much more to get into this story, and I think something that we're going to keep coming back to as time goes on because it seems as though Trump is planning on keeping these ICE tactical units in these cities for what seems to be an indefinite amount of time. They said that.
Yeah.
I mean, at first they were like, "Oh, they'll be there for a few days," then it was a few weeks, and then now Kristi Noem is saying that they'll be there until the socialist threat is taken out. I mean,
Jesus
so
Christ.
now they're what, declaring war on an ideology. So I mean, I have
That's
no
really
idea.
telling. That's really
Yeah,
telling. It's not about illegal immigration now. It's about socialism, which they've made that an issue for ever since the modern Republican Party existed.
right. So now, that they just want to make
Lunacy.
sure that they're going to be going after anyone who thinks differently than them. Like, if you are not willing to call these people fascists, I think you need to revisit the definition of the word. That really is just how I feel about that. But uh,
Absolutely.
we are going to transition to our next topic here. There is an AI center that has popped up in Memphis, Tennessee. That is courtesy of our friend Elon Musk, I believe. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about that?
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because it's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, but it's such an important story because it's indicative of what these large AI companies are trying to do. And I think just large companies in general, they're trying to flex their muscle to avoid scrutiny by the public and to avoid government regulations in order to make a lot of money. And so
Yeah,
there is a facility in Memphis, Tennessee. If you don't know about Memphis, it's a wonderful city. It is a city with a pretty sizable black population.
yeah,
And that's important to remember for this because a lot of this has to do with something called environmental racism. So XAI is a company owned by Elon Musk. I believe it's associated with X.com, formerly Twitter, should still be Twitter. And XAI is basically Grok, which is their version of I guess, ChatGPT. It's their AI chatbot situation. And so XAI is building what they or has built, excuse me, it's already built and operating what they term as the world's largest supercomputer in kind of the outskirts of Memphis in a neighborhood called Boxtown. More
right,
Perfect Union did a really, really great mini doc on this, and I would highly encourage everybody to go to YouTube and watch it. But basically, what this is a giant, massive data center. And if you know anything about these AI data centers, they take a ton of energy to run, and that's the
yeah,
crux of this. And so I wanted to say something because Elon Musk literally called this facility, this project, Project Colossus, which was named after a movie about a supercomputer that becomes sentient and takes over the world. So, if that is enough of a context setting for you, basically, it is burning enough methane to power a small city with no pollution controls. What happened with this is they came in and apparently made a deal with the city and the state without really going through the normal public channels to be able to build this large facility and just ended up building it without having to file the necessary permits or environmental regulations with the EPA, with the state government, with the local government, get their necessary permits. And as somebody who has worked in local permitting for renewable energy projects before,
yeah,
it takes a lot to get permits. Okay. It is not something that is normally very easy and you just do it by signing a piece of paper. And so they were able to do this without going through the regular local air permits and all this stuff. And basically, what is happening is people that live around the community are getting sick because of the pollution.
right,
And to say that there is so much pollution coming out of this plant, this they have 35 methane turbines powering 420 megawatts of electricity, which is enough to power 300,000 homes just for this one data center. Okay, so you have 35 methane turbines pushing out pollution to the world around these majority black neighborhoods, relatively poor neighborhoods. So they of course did not know this was happening, didn't have a say in it until it was already built. And people are credit to the Memphis community and the grassroots organizers because they are raising holy hell about this.
yeah,
But it just goes to show you that you throw around enough money and you get to do whatever you want. And in Tennessee, a lot of political capital is put towards economic development. And this project was sold as a huge boon to Memphis, which, if you don't know, Memphis, it's a big city, but it's one that's been struggling.
yeah,
Nashville has been blowing up and Memphis has been kind of shrinking in the shadow for a long time. And so I think if you were to be generous, the community leaders would say that this would be a boon for the community. But really, I think there's a lot of dollars and cents wrapped up into this. And Elon Musk coming through to a community that he knows nothing about, steamrolling them and getting to do whatever he wants. And it's
yeah,
causing problems with people, making them sick. It's just terrible. And I really think that people need to pay attention to stuff like this because it's a harbinger of what's to come.
right. Yeah, and I think there's so many different angles to go on here because not only do you have the pollution coming out of this particular area, but it is something that's almost indicative to this whole entire like region of the country. I mean, you have
Yeah.
so many different
Hmm.
cancer alleys around that area in like western Mississippi down into like Louisiana. There's just all of these chemical plants that are in these like predominantly black neighborhoods where these pockets of just cancer. Just I mean, people just like getting cancer all over these different areas, and I am just absolutely disgusted seeing the fact that these things just keep happening again and again and again. And the fact that you were mentioning that there's like basically like no like permitting process that went into this. They basically just were able to just like sign it off, give it to Elon Musk. We we constantly hear the phrase, like billionaires should not exist, on
Hmm.
like in like leftist dialogue, right now in the political sphere. But it's moments like this that really, I think, kind of hammer that home. We have people in our country that have so much power that they can just essentially go into certain communities, write their own rules, and there's no recourse that the people who live there really have for any of this, right? I mean, if the people had any say over this, struggling or not, they would have never have authorized this thing to be placed in their community, and
No.
yet it's there anyway, right?
Yeah.
And how many people are going to be sick now because of it? And how many people can even afford the healthcare costs that come with getting sick from this type of pollution? And this is also another, again, in a state that doesn't really push any kind of like real like climate change initiatives either. So you have the perfect storm of people being too poor to really fight back to do anything about it. When they get sick, they're not going to be able to afford their medical bills, and there's no one really speaking up on behalf of them in their local governments or in their city government or in their state governments because they were kind of all in bed with Elon Musk to begin with. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a perfect storm of corruption. And I feel for the people of Memphis, Tennessee. But unfortunately, this is not a story just about Memphis because this kind of thing is happening all over the place. And it feels like as we go forward, we are going to see more and more of this, because this really isn't just an AI story. This is just a corporate power story. And how many more cities will be subject to centers like this in the future?
Yeah. You're right. And, it shows that it doesn't take much for them to get what they want. I mean,
Yeah,
in Memphis, like I don't know all the details of this, but I know that like the Chamber of Commerce was behind it, the mayor was behind it, and honestly, you get those two entities and maybe the Shelby County government, and that's all you really need. And so when Southern Environmental Law Center filed records requests for this for the county government for Shelby County government, they were like there weren't any permits pulled for this project. There weren't any air permits pulled for this because if there were, they knew that they would get denied. And something
yeah,
else that's really important about this story they didn't mention is that throughout the process, XAI has been lying to the public. So when they were asked questions about like, oh, how many methane turbines do you really have? They said, oh, we only have X amount. I don't remember how much it was, but it was like less than 10, I think. So then
yeah,
SELC hired a photographer to fly over top and photograph, and they found that they had 35 of them. And so they came back and they said, "You have 35." And they're like, "Well, we don't run all of them. The other ones are for, emergency backup." So they took a thermal camera out there and did the same thing. They found that like 32 out of the 35 were operating. So these are bad faith actors who are trying to get in there and make a quick buck. And at the same time destroying these communities. And you mentioned like these communities where they're cancer ridden. I mean, I know personally from that because I grew up in Parkersburg, West Virginia, where DuPont's Washington Works plant was polluting our water with PFOAs for I think 20, 30 years when they were making Teflon.
yeah,
And so these places they're happening throughout the country in places where a, people are not aware, and B, they don't have the political capital or power to fight it. And I think that
yeah.
that's the case here too. And it's a shame. It's a shame. It's a real shame. And I think that people should be aware of this because you're right. It's not limited to AI, although these AI companies are really at the forefront of these massive data centers, and it's just going to be worse and worse. And so I don't know. It's something. This is a story that is an important story, and it's one that is a blueprint for what other companies are actually probably doing as we speak.
Yeah, and I would love to see something on the national level done about this because there should not be ever a case where companies are able to do something like this and just kind of get away with it because these things don't just affect these communities either. So you want to talk about like, oh, states' rights, this, that, and the other. But how often do we see the effects of things like this spilling over into other states? Memphis is a border city. Are this also going to affect people that are over in Missouri, over in Arkansas as well, down in
Mississippi,
Mississippi? So I mean,
guaranteed,
like,
guaranteed.
right. So I mean, like at this point, shouldn't these things be handled at a national level? Shouldn't these things be handled at a federal level? If you're going to be doing things. I mean, we're talking about anything environmental in general. You are spewing methane into the air. That's going to be dispersed around so many different areas around, around Memphis. I just think that these types of centers should not be handled in such a kind of like loosely way. I mean, that they can just be put up without any oversight whatsoever. I mean, what are going to be the domino effects that all of the people in the surrounding communities are going to have to deal with for years to come now? Because of the greed of Elon Musk and the indifference of a few people in that community who kind of just greenlit this process and didn't care about the repercussions that were going to happen later on.
Yeah, no, you're very correct, and it's going to take people in leadership and elected office to actually do something about it. And I will give credit. Representative Justin Pearson has been
Yeah,
he was one of the Tennessee Three, if you all remember. He has been leading the charge against this, and he's been doing a really great job of raising awareness on it. But he can't do it by himself, and so I mean, I agree. I think that there needs to be something done at the federal level, and there also just needs to be more collective outrage because Elon Musk is going to do this again if he's not already doing it.
yeah, absolutely. So we are going to transition now to our third story here because there are outrageous things happening everywhere, unfortunately. The University of Michigan apparently had a surveillance team going after people who were, I guess, pro Palestine students on their campus. I want to kind of read a
Jeez.
few different things here from The Guardian because they put out an expose about this. And then immediately after the expose came out, the University of Michigan rescinded this program. So I kind of wanted to go into this a little bit. I first came across this story on Democracy Now! They talked about this. It says the University of Michigan says that it's ending its contracts with plainclothes security officers on campus after an outcry over an expose was reported by The Guardian. Guardian's reporting found that investigators employed by a contracted private security group surveilled and threatened students on and off of campus. Some students were later charged and jailed, and the report found that only students involved in pro Palestine activism were targeted. Only
Wow.
students involved in pro Palestine activism were targeted. Michigan is the state with the highest concentration of Arab Americans in the country. The surveillance appears to be largely an intimidation tactic. That's what a lot of these students were saying who had been followed, recorded, or eavesdropped. Uh, Undercover investigators have cursed at students, threatened them, and in one case drove a car at a student who had to jump out of the way. This was according to student accounts and video footage that they shared with The Guardian. Lastly, here, students say that they have frequently identified undercover investigators who confronted them in two bizarre interactions captured by one student on video. A man had been tailing students, faking disabilities, and noisily and falsely accusing students of attempting to rob him. So these are this is an incredible story to me. We have been seeing the Trump administration go after universities around the country right now, particularly in the Northeast, for having pro Palestine protesters on campus, threatening to get rid of their funding, so on and so forth, get rid of their nonprofit status. This is mostly happening at Harvard right now, but he's been going after other universities as well. And so now it seems, though, the University of Michigan, maybe for that reason, or who knows what exactly the reason is, now they are trying to go after students who are holding pro-Palestine like activism events on campus and trying to find different ways to put them in jail, surveil them, harass them. I mean, this is an absolutely insane story, Chuck. I mean, I have so many different thoughts that I kind of want to get into about this because there's so many different branches to take on this story itself. But what was your first reaction to this?
Yeah, well, my first reaction as a Michigan State grad is typical Michigan Wolverine behavior. Uh, kidding, kidding. The Israel Palestine has broken people's brains. I swear to
Yeah,
God. Like, this is something where it's really unbelievable until you actually witness it. And I've seen the videos of some of it. I mean, in a place like Michigan, where their state government is run primarily by Democrats, I think almost all
yeah,
Democrat elected officials at statewide offices. but they're the ones that are endorsing this, from my understanding. At least Dana Nessel, the Attorney General, is, and I just don't understand what they're hoping to accomplish with this, because this is not like if their goal is to turn the tide against the pro-Palestine voices, this is not the way to do it. It's only going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
But this is a tyranny on a different level, and I think that it really goes to show you, like, we just finished talking about Donald Trump and how the federal government has been weaponized to go after protesters and suppress speech in that way.
Yeah.
And now here we're looking at a democratically controlled state and and a university system that is doing the same exact thing almost. And these people feel so threatened by pro-Palestine voices, and I find that to be so telling, because more and more people are speaking out against this genocide, and the more that people speak out, the more authoritarian it seems like governments and government officials act. And I just, I at the end of the day, I just don't understand, like, why so many entities are acting like this, because it's so ridiculous and so clearly a violation of people's rights, a fundamental right that they are supposed to be teaching at that university.
Yeah.
And it's not a sham university. I will admit, the University of Michigan, fine institution, but it really goes to show that, like, this is not a partisan thing. There's so many Democrats that are either actively endorsing this type of action or passively endorsing it by not speaking out against it. And I think that that's
Yeah.
really important, because with stuff like this, it goes back to what we were talking about with ICE. The more that it happens, the more that it's normalized, the more our rights get eroded. And so
Yeah.
today it was University of Michigan. Tomorrow it's going to be Iowa State University or California University System, or where have you, University of Florida. It's going to happen in other places too. And I think that it's just really, really shameful. And I don't know. I don't see the same thing happening at universities for pro-Israel voices that I'm aware of. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but it
Yeah.
seems like there's so many people that are trying to go after the quote unquote woke left at this. And it's like, God forbid we want an entire population to not be leveled and wiped off the face of the earth. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Terrible people here. This is
Hmm.
actually the first thing that came to my mind when I heard this story was, could you imagine the outrage had this happened to pro-Israel protesters?
Oh,
Could
absolutely. I'm
you imagine the absolute just like typhoon of just like coverage from every mainstream outlet, from every cable news source, from every print journalism place? How many different senators, how many different members of the House would be coming out and just like decrying anti-Semitism and just like the persecution of of the Jewish faith and so on and so forth? Could you imagine just the absolute tidal wave if a university contracted a private security force to go off campus to surveil and harass people who were pro-Israel protesters? Could you imagine? I could. I think it would be very easy to know what would happen
Oh
next. And
yeah.
yet, not only do you not see any condemnation from anybody basically about this story is basically non-existent. I mean,
Hmm.
I am constantly in the news looking for stories. I had a hard time finding information about this. It was mind-boggling to me that you could actually weaponize a security force to go after students to harass them for not breaking any rules, mind you. Because had they broken some rules, that would have been something that the university would have gone after them for. If there was actually something done here that was illegal or broken some kind of student conduct policy, the university would have came down against them, but there was nothing here. So they just had these people going after them and harassing them and surveilling them because they wanted to intimidate these people. That
Oh
is
yeah.
patently insane. And what are they even trying to intimidate them for? Speaking up about Palestine, there are people who are sitting in an open air prison who are being bombed and starved to death every single day. And you have people around the country who are saying, our tax dollars are contributing to this. We don't like that. Please stop. And these people are being labeled as radicals. Like, what does that even say about the state of our country here? I mean, that is patently insane. And you would almost expect that from the Trump regime at this point. But the fact that so many
Yeah.
Democrats are on board with that, I said something on my story on Instagram just yesterday where I said that as much as I am talking about the Republican regime right now and how it's dehumanizing people in this country, around the world, and how just like frightening it all is right now, I don't want that to also give cover to the Democrats, because I think at the end of the
Yeah,
day, they have so much complicity in all of this that I think the only true way forward is to dismantle this Democratic Party and rebuild it to a true opposition party, because most of them aren't meeting this moment. I think honestly, most of them don't really deserve to represent us because they don't really represent us.
I agree. I used to be like iffy on that proposal, but I past year has changed me completely on that 100%. I agree with you. You know what the University of Michigan doing this reminds me of? It reminds me of the coal companies back in like the 20s and 30s hiring the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, like the southern version of the Pinkertons, where they
Mm,
would hire them to spy on coal miners who were trying to unionize because
mm,
they didn't want them to unionize. They would go after them. They would go to their houses. They would go to their churches, their schools, and stalk them. Basically, beat them, that kind of thing. It does really remind me of that, with how they're trying to suppress what is a constitutionally protected right with respect to speech, and in that case,
yeah.
it was soon to be protected ability to organize. And it just goes to show you that, like, these entities feel threatened by this, and that's really telling of the moral alignment of those institutions. And I think you're
Yeah.
right with the Democrats. They don't deserve a pass on this because they have been extremely complicit in it. And I mean, things in Gaza are not better under Trump, under Biden. It is a one of the biggest crises of our generation right now. And
Yeah.
I just think that it really is. It's shocking to see the type of indifference that we see from our elected officials, from supposedly progressive, thoughtful, compassionate, empathetic Democrats, and it's just really shameful.
It's incredibly shameful, and it truly kind of like magnifies the problem, right? Because you would hope that in a moment like this, where we are seeing what is without question the biggest humanitarian crisis that we have seen this century, what is being claimed by genocide scholars as a genocide, which is being condemned by basically every single international entity, to the point where when they hold these ceasefire resolutions at the United Nations, every country is on board with it except for the United States, to which they're able to veto these things. Because don't even get me started about how the fact that one country is able to veto a resolution at the UN, I
Yeah,
think that's
right.
an absolute joke. So like everyone seems to be in lockstep about how problematic all of this is. Like Israel's ability to go out and manipulate so many different governments around the world, their prevailing influence that they have here in America, and how our elected representatives are kind of just like marching along with this. But I think here in the United States, I find that more and more I just desperately want to see something truly represent me and my ideals. I don't see that with the Democratic Party, and I will continue to speak up on the fact that like we can't be complacent with having these people in power, because it's not good enough just to say you oppose Trump. You have to actually be going out and fighting back in a real way, standing up for people in a real way. Not really seeing that enough right now. But I kind of want to transition to our final topic here about wanting to have a Joe Rogan of the left. Uh, there are so many different thoughts about this one here, Chuck. But why don't you kind of intro this
Yeah.
one a little bit here? What is the conversation around wanting to have a Joe Rogan of the left right now?
Yeah. So, well, this came up because if you just look at the non-traditional, we'll call it, media ecosystem, where lots of people are getting maybe their news or just their entertainment from, it is dominated by these figures that are either explicitly right wing or like right wing adjacent, or at least right wing curious, we'll say. People like Joe Rogan being the main one, and he's got like the most listened to podcast I think in the world.
Yeah,
Theo Vaughn, who's a comedian who genuinely is a really funny comedian, but he is also just dumb, and hosts a lot of people on his show, and that really amplify these horrible views to a wide audience.
yeah.
Andrew Schultz, all these people, the Nelk Boys, Asmongold, which I'll get into in a minute of who he
Oh
is.
God.
Yeah, exactly. The Rat King himself. Yeah, so you have all of these voices that, and many of them not explicitly political. In fact, most of the ones that I mentioned, actually all of the ones that I mentioned, are not explicitly political shows, but they'll dive into politics.
Right.
And so that was a big, I mean, I think it was definitely a factor in elections for sure. It wasn't the only thing. There's not ever one only reason why an individual loses, but the media ecosystem is completely weighted in Republicans' favor and in right wing favor. And so Democrats are trying to figure out, I guess, how they're going to solve this, because the left doesn't really have much skin in the game. I mean, I think like there are a handful of voices out there that are like center left. I would say that have a decent sized audience. Midas Touch is one of them. I think the biggest, creator out there is probably Hassan Piker, who is a
Yeah.
leftist Twitch streamer who is really good. I really like him a lot, but he's one dude,
Yeah.
and he's far outflanked by all these right wing entities. So the Democrats are like, what can we do to court male voters and to create our own ecosystem? And that is a false premise to begin with. Now they're throwing like $20 million to try to court the male vote and try to cultivate this quote unquote Joe Rogan of the left.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this and I'm rolling my eyes and beating my head against the wall and saying, here we go again with Democrats not understanding what the fuck is going on. These Most of these people were not created in some test tube. Now they are propped up certainly by right wing money. We know that. Benny
Yeah.
Johnson and Beanie Guy, what is his name, Tim Pool, who's received money from like the Russian government at some point. But
Yep.
most of these, they cultivate an organic following from their platform, whatever they do, and they don't explicitly talk politics. They talk about a bunch of other stuff. And so that's how they get these followings. They're not created in a lab. And the fact that trying to manufacture this is what the Democrats are thinking of doing is so just frustrating, because it's like you don't get what the problem is. That people can sniff out inauthenticity
Yes, they can.
a mile away. And so
Yeah.
trying to create something like this in a lab, so to speak, is never going to work. And the thing is like the right wing space is made up of such fucking losers. Like I mentioned, I mentioned, I mentioned Asmongold. A lot of people that are watching this probably don't know who Asmongold is, and
Yeah.
I didn't until like a year ago.
I just recently. Yeah.
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 He is the largest political streamer, period. I believe. I think that's correct. He's on
Yeah.
Twitch every single day, pretty much. He
Yeah.
is live streaming constantly to 60, 70, 80,000 people at a time, hundreds of thousands of people over the course of a day. His YouTube channels get millions and millions and millions of views, and he is
Right.
this disgusting human being. When I say disgusting, Google Asmongold Room. It will show you everything you need to know. He uses a dead rat as an alarm clock, and what I mean by that is that he has admitted this. He has a dead rat in his room, and he knows it's time to wake up when the sun comes in and starts cooking the rat's carcass and smelling, and he wakes up from the smell. I am not making that up. That is what he has said. This guy does not leave his house. He lives in utter filth, yet is a multimillionaire because of how popular of a streamer he is. He is the quintessential incel. Like whatever
Ooh.
you think of an incel being, that's him. He is the most popular political streamer on the right now. So if we can't figure out something to combat that, that is a utter moral failing and just pathetic. Just I don't know. I don't know the words to describe how pathetic this dude is. And like, look, Hassan Piker is great. And I really like him a lot, and I think he's a great communicator. But again, he can't do it himself. We
No.
need we need a lot of those people. And it just frustrates the hell out of me that Democrats are like not getting like most of the party leadership. I think people like David Hogg probably understand it, but most of the party leadership just don't get it. They're like, let's throw money at a problem and it'll fix itself. That ain't gonna work.
No. I mean, I think one of the big problems that preceded the current problems is that they waited too long to get into this in the first place. I mean,
Absolutely.
there was this overarching narrative about just like, oh, what we need to do is just, tax, like all like podcast equipment. Let's just like get rid of men being on podcasts. And
So
like,
dumb.
I understand like where a lot of that like frustration comes from, but at the same time, it's like, look, people just listen to podcasts. Like the problem isn't necessarily that people are on podcasts. The problem is that you have too much of a concentration of negativity, in the podcast sphere. The podcast sphere is being dominated by people who are saying a bunch of atrocious stuff. Like I don't think the goal here should be to eliminate podcasts. I think we just need to be highlighting and putting in more efforts and resources behind people who are actually speaking the truth, combating disinformation. I mean, it is just where people are putting their time and space right now. When people are out, commuting somewhere, they'll put on a podcast, or maybe they'll have like a YouTube, channel going in the background, like while they're driving somewhere every day. I mean, a lot of people still live in and around major cities, and they have to spend an hour or more in their car every day. It's just what people do. They take in information. You listen to sports podcasts. I listen to the Pat McAfee show sometimes. It's just,
That makes me great West Virginian. Love that guy. He's got some
it's
problems, but he's fine.
he's got a lot of problems, and I think he's a right winger. But like, but it's a convenient thing. And so, as somebody who like we both do podcasts, independent thought, Appalachia. I mean, like this is something that like we do, and so I think that there does need to be more of an investment into it. I mean, there are some other people out there. I mean, there's the Keith Edwardses of the world, and the David Packmans, and Brian Tyler Cohen's. I mean, like they have been kind of making a name for themselves more on YouTube, but there is a lot of billionaire money that goes into the right wing propaganda
Oh yeah,
machine. And one of the names you didn't mention earlier was like the Daily Wire, and how they
yeah.
have cultivated so much for themselves. Ben Shapiro, the white supremacist Matt Walsh. I forget the other guy's name who I can't really take too seriously right now.
I mean,
Um,
there's so many of them. Man.
yeah, but Candace Owens was there for a while. She's not there anymore, but now she does her own thing. Jordan Peterson, Tucker Carlson, still floating out there in the ether. So Charlie Kirk, who is just a constant troll, in our lives. I mean, there are so many of them, and they take in just tens of millions of dollars, like for these people. I mean, I think Steven Crowder was approached by the Daily Wire, and they offered
Yeah,
him like a $50 million contract. I mean, there's
something absurd. Yeah,
so much money going into the right wing propaganda sphere, and so we kind of like constantly asking ourselves how important this all is. When you are seeing rampant disinformation going across our country right now, and you're wondering, how do people think this way, why do people think this way? I think too many people on the left are disconnected from just how much of a prevailing reach these people have. I
yeah.
mean, when it is hard for me to stomach, but the few times that I've watched some clips from the Daily Wire or for Tim Pool's show, they are willing to and routinely do spit out more disinformation in a matter of 5 minutes than you would think it's even possible. It actually, in some cases, will put even Fox News to shame.
Yeah.
Fox News seems tame compared to a lot of these people. So I think that the real answer here, Chuck, needs to be that if the Democrats actually want to truly win back people, if they truly want to combat this, they need to throw resources at people who are already doing this and help them build up a following even more versus trying to create some astroturf thing that's never going to really succeed, because it's obvious when people are trying to just manufacture something that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, and I think that you're 100% right. I think there's also another element to it that there's not an easy answer for, but there's such a cultural problem that they're having, which is like the Democrats are just not perceived as being cool at all. Now, I'm not saying the
Yeah.
Republicans are either. Like, there's some weird sphere of people that think Donald Trump is, but more importantly, Democrats are viewed as super lame and woke, scoldy, all this stuff. And I'm not saying like woke was the reason they lost the election. That's stupid. But my point is that there we have like creators like Brian Tyler Cohen and everything that are focused on news and politics, but most people don't like to consume that on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
the way that Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and all them are successful is that they'll allow that stuff to trickle in, like with their
Yeah.
guests and stuff like that. And but it won't be the entire focus of their show, and
Right.
that's something that's missing. Like, look at Barstool Sports, for example. That
Yeah.
nothing on paper makes it a right wing ecosystem, but it is
Yeah.
because sports and like their bro culture and stuff. And I'm not saying that we need to recreate that, but I'm saying that like that's what the left is up against. And it's a really hard situation because you can take democratic money and put into things, but I guarantee you that sometimes, like with some of these non-political shows and stuff, you're really going to need to build it out in so many different ways. And I think that they need to start supporting like mid-tier creators and helping them gain bigger followings and helping them reach more people organically, not pushing messages. But because there's so many left creators out there that are like kind of hanging out in the ether, right?
Yeah.
They're doing well for themselves. Like they've cultivated somewhat of an independent following, but not enough to really reach like a Theo Bond level audience or a Joe Rogan level audience or anything to even remotely compete with that. And I think that's where a lot of the resources should also be pushed into because there's some like I think the biggest like non-political left-leaning, left-wing creators that I can think of would be like Last Podcast on the Left and the Last Podcast Network, and they purposely don't talk about politics really all that much at all because they
Yeah.
they have a wide broad audience. But you can listen to them and you can tell where their alignment is,
Right.
and it's interesting because I think what really needs to happen is the Democrats need people to actually understand the information ecosystem and
Right.
not just be like, well, we need to put more money into Brian Tyler Cohen. And I'm not trying to shit on Brian Tyler Cohen. I think he's fine, but it's just
Yeah.
like you need more of like Pat McAfee's, for example. And again, not excusing Pat McAfee. I'm just saying like I'm
Yeah.
biased towards him because he was a good kicker for West Virginia University. That's my only thing I like about him. But
Yeah.
we need more like the Pardon My Takes of the world, the Barstool Sports of the world, where it's like they're able to reach people in mediums where these people aren't actively seeking out politics. And I think that
Right.
that's a really, really important thing. And I don't, the problem is, I don't have the answer. I don't know how you do that. But the focus with the Democrats right now is clearly like way off.
Yeah. No, there's no clear vision right now. I mean, I think there's no clear game plan other than to let's just sit back and do nothing while Trump wreaks havoc across the country. I mean, that seems to be the
Yeah.
game plan right now. So I I am immensely frustrated with the direction of the Democratic Party. I think that they are constantly being led by people who one of two things has to be true. Either they are the most incompetent people on earth and they keep failing up, or they are purposely this ineffective for you insert your own reasoning for why you think that is.
I think that they're incompetent and that they're too afraid to take any large moral positions and have like a firm stance on anything on that's even remotely left wing, because they're a
Yeah.
center right party in many respects, and I agree with you. I think that there needs to be people in the party that actually understand that. And I mean, I don't know if there ever will be, but independent creators who aren't linked to the party system might be the way to go because I mean, look, you have people that have tremendous platforms that have a lot of influence that could influence people in the right way, but
Yeah.
you know there's no organized ecosystem out there and there's no organized money. I saw a post from Taylor Lorenz the other day, who like, she's interesting. She's a great journalist and I really like her. But she was saying how like people on the right, billionaires on the right, are paying people to be counter protesters, right? Like there's a whole
Yeah.
funneled money ecosystem for them to do that and these
Yeah.
these protests to be counter protesters. Nothing like that exists on the left.
No.
Nothing.
No. I mean, and I think there's a larger conversation around like why that might be,
Yeah.
because I mean, I think to a degree you kind of have to question where some of the money comes from and where it goes in the Democratic
Sure.
Party. But, I think the overall takeaway that I just want to present to this conversation is the fact that it comes back to Democratic leadership. Like we are watching a mismanagement of funds, a mismanagement of direction, a mismanagement of tactics. I mean, like we just cannot seem to find people who are heading this party who seem to be truly representing what we are asking from them. And until that changes, I think that we have to keep kind of shining a spotlight on it because I think for me, it's just as important to point that out because if we really want to defeat the Republican Party, if you really want to defeat Trump and the reason why he has power in the first place, you're not going to accomplish that unless you have a force that's truly willing to combat what they stand for and what they are trying to do. And so I think it's just as important to scrutinize our quote unquote team as is the other team.
I 100% agree, and I think that people who scold other people for criticizing Democrats need to just like wake up and realize that if you are against any criticism of your quote unquote team or party, that means that you are in a cult, and you
Yeah,
need to just really come to terms with that.
yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. Chuck, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really do appreciate it. For those who want to subscribe to to his pod or to his Substack, go ahead and click the top of the screen right now. You can click on where our names are scrolling. You can subscribe to his newsletter. For those who want to check out some other places that you're at online, Chuck, where can they find you at?
Yeah, it's just Appodlachia on every platform. Appodlachia on every single platform: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, whatever that's called anymore, YouTube, all of that good stuff. And if you're a fan of Demon Copperhead, the book, I've got a great interview out with Barbara Kingsolver that just came out yesterday. So check that out.
Yeah, for those who are watching the playback, some of those links will be in the episode description right now. So go ahead and click there, and you'll be able to see those underneath. Chuck, really do appreciate it. Hope to have you back on, hopefully like next month or something like that.
Yeah, let's do it, man. This is great. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody for watching, and thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I think we should do this more often.
Definitely. Really do appreciate it. Thank you for everyone who's been watching. I'll be back again tomorrow with Natalie Bensavenga at about 5 o'clock Eastern time, so or 5:30 Eastern time actually. So make sure that you are tuned in for that, and we will have some more guests next week as well. So make sure that you are having your push notifications turned on so that you know when we go live. Thank you, everyone. We will see you in the next one.
See ya.